Ready? Okay.
Your mic.
Okay, ready. Any camera? Script ready?
Camera ready? Well, Marx wasn't just a philosopher. He was a critic of society. He believed that the economy, how money and resources are controlled, shapes everything from politics to human behavior. Let me introduce him. So, Karl Marx was a German philosopher and economist born in the early 19th century. Critically, analyzed capitalist society, arguing that economic conditions fundamentally shape human consciousness and also societal structures. So Marx also introduced the concept of dialectic materialism, positing that class struggle drives historical change in contrast to the idealist philosophy of thinkers like Hegel. The Communist Manifesto is one of his idea, in which the Communist Manifesto, the idea of worker revolution against capitalist oppression, and also Das Kapital, a detailed critique of political economy focusing on labor value and class dynamics. Marxist concepts are all connected by the common goal to contribute to what they perceive as the greater good of humankind and its environment. So, Karl Marx also introduced the idea of class struggle, the constant tension between the wealthy elite, the bourgeoisie, and also the working class, and also the proletariat. So the bourgeoisie is the owners of wealth and production. The proletariat is the working class. He argued that all of this class struggle is the driving force of historical change. This idea was very different from philosophers like George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who both of them focus more on ideas rather than the material conditions.
Alright, so can you describe what is international relation actually is?
So basically, international relation is the study of a relation of states with each other and with the international organizations and certain subnational entities, for example, the bureaucracy, political parties, and also interest groups like such and so. It is also related to a number of other academic disciplines, including political science, geography, history, economics, law, sociology, psychology, and philosophy.
So does Marxism has any relationship with international relations?
Well, it is a critical theory that examines how global politics is shaped by capitalism, economic structures, and also social relations rather than just a state of behavior. Marxism in international relations, IR, basically challenges mainstream theories by arguing that international systems are historically constructed, not naturally. It rejects the idea that states are fully independent actors. That emphasizes the role of global economy, multinational corporations, international institutions, and also blurs the line between domestic and also international politics.
Okay, hi everyone. So, when we look at how the world is structured today, it's easy to see wealth and power gaps. But
why do they exist?
yes, so today I'm breaking down the core foundation of Marxism theory, especially focusing on two key assumptions.
that explain these dynamics, which is class struggle and exploitation.
Yes. Alright. Let's start with class struggle. Marxism argues that the society is inherently divided into conflicting classes based on economy and social status. This friction inevitably creates deep-rooted antagonism. Think about this way. On the other hand, you have the bourgeoisie, the capitalists who own equipment, the factories, and the materials needed to make things. On the other hand, you have the proletariat, the working class. Because workers don't have this means of production, the only thing they have to trade is to survive is their work ability. Capitalists need that labor to make a profit. So, they offer wages. But to maximize profit, capitalists argues that they want to keep wages low and hours long, while the workers want the exact opposite. Marxism argued that this system is inherently built on exploitation. He believed that the true justice can only happen when the working class rises up, remove the capitalist system, and establish a socialist society when the workers become the ruling group. Okay, now, so you might be wondering, Marxism wrote this over a century ago. Is it still relevant? So, absolutely. While our world looks very different today, class relations still anchor our social structure. This theory gives us the vital lens to analyze modern conflict and inequality. It also serves a guide to action, reminding us to have the courage to stand up against the injustice. However, we have to recognize that relying solely on the literal revolution isn't the only path today. In contemporary society, we also need diverse strategies, including peaceful reform and democratic participation. Okay, now this brings us to the second big assumption, which is
Exploitation.
yes. So according to Marxism, workers are exploited because they don't get to keep the full value of labor they put in. So if they did, capitalists wouldn't make any money buying their labor in the first place. Yes. So first, to explain this puzzle, Marxism introduced the labor theory of value, which is
Separate value into two types. The first one is use value.
this is purely subjective. It's the actual utility or benefit a person gets from using a product. And then secondly,
Is exchange value.
yes, exchange value. Exchange value is subjective. Secondly, there's exchange value. This is objective. It's determined by what Marxism calls a socially necessary labor time, which is just a fancy way saying that average amount of time it takes an average worker to produce that item. So the capitalist profits by paying the worker for their subsistence, but pocketing the extra exchange value the worker creates during those long hours. The gap?
That's exploitation.
Yes. So we have looked at how capitalism creates exploitation and struggles between the classes within a society. But Marxism doesn't stop at national border. This exact same dynamic of power, wealth concentration, and exploitation actually play out a massive global scale. To explain how this framework
shapes modern international relations through global economic power and system dependency. So I'm going to hand over to me.
So, we have looked at how capitalism creates exploitation and struggles between classes within a society.
But Marxism doesn't stop at national borders. This exact same dynamics of power, wealth connection, and exploitation actually play out a massive global scale.
Exactly. So, to explain how this framework shaped modern international relations through global economic power and systematic dependency, I'm going to hand over to Melissa to the next point.
Thanks, Kisina. Exactly, just like individual capitalists dominate workers to maximize profits. So, Marxism theory in international relations argue that wealthy states do the exact same thing to weaker one on a global scale. So, this will bring us to the next key assumption, which is economic power under capitalism.
Thanks, Kisina. Next, I'll explain how capitalism causes inequality from the Marxist perspective. According to Marxism, capitalism is an economic system in which wealth, businesses, factories, and resources are owned by a small group of people known as capitalists. Under this system, workers must sell their labor in exchange for wages in order to survive. Marxism believes that capitalism creates inequality because workers produce goods and services, but they do not receive the full value of what they produce. Instead, a large portion of the profits is kept by the capitalist who owns the means of production. This idea is closely related to Marxist theory because Marx argued that capitalism benefits the wealthy classes while exploiting the working class. As a result, wealth becomes concentrated among a small group of people, while many workers continue to struggle economically. For example, workers in a factory may spend long hours producing products, but most of the profit generated from those products go to the company owners rather than the workers themselves. Therefore, Marxist argues that capitalism creates inequality by concentrating wealth and power in the hands of small capitalist class while exploiting the working class. Next, I will discuss the last main point of Marxism theory, which is imperialism. Okay, what is imperialism? Imperialism refers to a situation where powerful countries dominate or exploit weaker countries for economic benefits such as resources, labor, and also markets. Okay, according to Marxism, imperialism is a direct result of capitalism. As capitalist countries seek greater profits, they expand their economic influence beyond their own borders and get access to cheaper resources and labor in less developed countries. So this idea is closely related to Marxist theory because Marxists believe that the same exploitation that occurs in between social class and within a countries also occurs between rich and poor countries in the international level. Marxists argue that powerful countries often benefit from the resources and labor of weaker countries, while the weaker countries remain economically dependent and less developed. For example, during the colonial period, Europe powers such as Britain and France extracted resources and wealth from their colonies, including India and many parts of Africa, to support their own economic growth. Therefore, Marxism views imperialism as a form of global exploitation in which powerful capitalism countries maintain economic dominance over weaker states for their own benefit. Overall, Marxism believes capitalism creates inequality within societies, while imperialism extends this inequality to the international level by allowing powerful countries to exploit their weaker countries.
Can you further analyze this issue from a Marxist perspective?
Yes. So, according to studies on the Bangladesh ready-made garment industry, Bangladesh has become one of the world's largest exporters of clothing products. So, many international fashion brands choose to manufacture their products there because labor costs are significantly cheaper compared to developed countries. So, as a result, the garment industry has become a major source of income for Bangladesh and employs millions of workers, especially women from low-income families. But however, despite the rapid growth of the industry, many workers continue to face serious challenges in their daily working life. So studies shows that garment workers in Bangladesh often work long hours in overcrowded factories while receiving extremely low wages. And in some countries, workers are also exposed to unsafe and unhealthy working environment.
About it?
Yes. So, one of the most tragic accidents that happened was the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013, where more than 1,000 garment workers lost their life after a factory building collapsed due to poor safety conditions. The incident received international attention and exposed the harsh realities faced by the workers in the global garment industry. Despite these dangerous conditions, many workers continue to working because they depend heavily on these jobs to support their families and have limited employment opportunities. And at the same time, multinational corporations and global fashion brands continue to generate huge profits through the international sale of these products.
How can this issue be analyzed from a Marxist perspective?
Alright, So from a Marxism perspective, this situation clearly reflects Karl Marx's theory of exploitation under capitalism. Marx argued that the bourgeoisie control wealth and production, while the proletariat provide labor in exchange for wages. Although workers are responsible for producing goods and creating economic value, they often receive only a small portion of the profit generated from their labor. According to Ullah's study on Marxism and industrial relation in Bangladesh, workers in government industry often have weak bargaining power because they are economically dependent on factory employment for survival. As a result, employers and corporations hold greater economic power compared to workers, making it difficult for workers to demand better wages or safer working conditions. So this study also explained how globalism and neoliberal economic policies contribute to this issue. Globalization allows multinational corporations to move production across countries in search of cheaper labor and lower production costs. Meanwhile, neoliberal policies promote free market competition and encourage government to reduce restriction on businesses and foreign investment. From a Marxist viewpoint, this system mainly benefit wealthy corporations because companies continuously focus on maximizing profit while minimizing labor costs. So consequently, developing countries like Bangladesh has become economically dependent on global cooperation and foreign capital. So this further increases economic inequality and strengthens class division between the capitalist class and the working class.
So we often hear that Marxism criticizes the global capitalist system. So how does this theory influence international relations between countries?
Good question. Generally, Marxism views international relations as a system influenced by capitalism, inequality, and economic power. It explains how powerful countries often dominate weaker countries through economic control, trades, and global institutions. So basically, from your questions, I can identify the impacts of this. Like, firstly, is like impacts towards global inequality between countries have been increased. Secondly, is exploitation of developing countries. Next is dependency of poor countries on rich countries. And the last one, impact is global trade system is going to be unfair.
I see. Okay, got it. So based on those main ideas, can you explain in details for each impact? Like for the first idea, from Marxist perspective, why does the gap between rich and poor countries continue to increase?
From Marxist perspective, the global system mainly benefit rich and developed countries more than poor countries. Developed nations control important such as trades, technology, and global finance, which allows them to continue gaining more wealth. Meanwhile, developing countries often depend on exporting raw materials, but need to import expensive manufactured goods from richest countries. Because of this, unequal relationships, rich countries become more richer, while poor countries remain less developed.
For exploitations of developing countries, how does Marxism explain the exploitation of developing countries by powerful nations and multinational corporations?
For this idea, Marxism also argues that powerful countries and multinational corporations exploit developing countries from cheap labor and natural resources. Many companies move their production to poorer countries because wages are lower and labor laws are weaker. Although this creates job opportunities, workers are often paid low salaries while corporations earn huge profits. They show that capitalist system can benefit rich nations at the expense of weaker countries.
for the next impact that you've told earlier, why do Marxists believe that developing countries become dependent on the developing countries?
You mean about dependency of poor countries on rich countries?
Yeah.
For this impact, the dependency of developing countries on developed nations. You mean about dependency of poor countries on rich countries?
Yes.
For this impact, the dependency of developing countries on developed nations. Poor countries often rely on rich countries for loans, technology, trade, and financial aids. For example, many countries depend on institutions such as IMF and World Bank for economic support. However, Marxists believe this dependency can create debt and long-term reliance, making it difficult for poorest countries to become fully independent.
Okay, I do get the concept. Sorry. Okay, I do get. Okay, I do get the concept. And for the last question, according to Marxist theory, why is the global trade system considered unfair to developing countries?
Okay, for these last questions, Marxists believe that the global trade system is unfair because international trade rules usually favor developed countries. Rich nations have power in setting economic policies and protecting their industries. As a result, developing countries struggles to compete equal in the global market. Marxists therefore argue that the international relations, which is international economic systems, mainly serve the interests of wealthy capitalist countries.
So, as a historian, can you
give your opinion, boleh?
give your opinion towards this Marxism theory?
Well, basically, Marxism in international relation really helps us understand how global politics is influenced not only by the states but also by capitalism. Marxism in international relations help us understand better how global politics is influenced not only by the states but also by capitalism, economic powers, and also class inequality. So according to the Marxist theory, powerful countries and MNC, multinational corporations, often dominate weaker countries through exploitation, dependency, and also unfair trade systems. This clearly can be seen in Bangladesh garment industry, where workers are paid very low wages despite working long hours and also contributing greatly to production. At the same time, global companies continue to earn large profits from selling these products internationally. This situation reflects Marx's idea of exploitation, where workers create value but do not receive fair rewards for their labor. Overall, Marxism remains relevant in today's international relations because it explains why inequality between rich and poor countries still exists. The theory provides an important perspective for understanding global economic structures, inequality distribution of wealth, and also the continuing influence of capitalism in the modern world.